Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Andrew's Life. Now, today, I'm going to be doing a video just kind of educating people on what it's like and what my personal experience has been when living in rural/countryside communities. Now, a lot of what I say on this video, although what I'm getting ready to say on this video is not gonna 100% be true in all cases of people who choose to leave the city and choose to live somewhere out in the country or out in a rural community. Although there's going to also be exceptions to the rule, I would say at least most of what I'm getting ready to say on this video is going to be fairly common of what one can expect when living out in the country/rural community. And a lot of what I'm going to say is also things that I at some point have encountered when living in the country/a rural community. Now, bear in mind, I myself currently live in a rural community, and I spent 8 months, give or take. Well, no, I take that back. I would say combined, I spent between the 8 months or so that I lived in the country in Alabama and the several months I was living out in the country up in Indiana before I left Indiana and moved to Alabama. I would say I lived in the country for about a year. And at this point, I've been living in a rural community. Let me do some math here. I've been living in a rural community for now, this is going on my 5th month. Now, before I continue to talk about what I'm going to talk about, just so you guys have an idea of where I'm going. Now, when I first began the video, I was driving through downtown La Vergne, Alabama. So you guys saw a little bit of La Vergne, Alabama. So basically on this video, I'm going to be taking a bunch of country roads. So you're going to see a lot of country on this video, obviously, which is going to be appropriate for what I'm going to be discussing on this particular video. So basically, a minute ago, you guys saw me drive through downtown La Vergne. I'm going to be driving from downtown La Vergne to a town of Glenwood, Alabama. Now, when I get to Glenwood, Alabama, which is a very small town, the population is only at 182 people, I'm going to give you guys a tour of Glenwood. And then once I leave Glenwood, I'm going to continue to drive. And again, you're going to see a bunch of country. And then I'm going to drive through Henderson. Now Henderson, I'm not sure whether it's even, I think Henderson is a unincorporated community. I mean, basically, it's just a blink of an eye area. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a town. I think Henderson is an unincorporated community. I mean, basically, it's just one street with several houses, and then that's it. So I'm gonna be driving through Henderson, and then from there, I'm gonna continue to drive down the country road. And I think at the point where I end this video is gonna be when I get to Alabama 87. Alright, so basically, I mean, I noticed in more recent times, like within the last, I would say 3 or 4 years, give or take, I noticed that there's been more content creators that have been glorifying the country life, glorifying living somewhere in the middle of nowhere, out in the country, or in some super small rural community. I mean, and I'm pretty sure now, at this point, I don't really pay much attention to Instagram. I mean, I go on Facebook every so often. If I'm looking to buy something, I'll go on the Facebook Marketplace. But I'm pretty confident that there's been Instagram posts of people purchasing land out in the country, or maybe they might purchase a home sitting on several acres of land somewhere in the country, or somewhere in a small rural, in the middle of nowhere, out of the way community. So I noticed that there's been people glorifying that type of life, which, you know what, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you know, you got a lot of people that want to get out of the hustle and bustle of the city life, as many people would put it. You got a lot of people that are tired of living in the city. You know, so the city's too big, it's too crowded, too many taxes, too many local government regulations, crime is too high, and the reasons why many people are leaving the city goes on and on and on. Now with me, I grew up in a small city of Elyria, Ohio, which is a half hour outside Cleveland, Ohio. And then when I got older, I spent several years living in the metro. I mean, I lived in several metros throughout the Midwest and the South. And I also lived in several smaller cities as well during my adult life. And I would say for the last several years, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, how would it be like if I decided to live somewhere out in the country? Or I decided to live in some super small rural, out of the way community. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of the many people that was looking at all the YouTube videos of people that decided to leave the city and move out in the country, move out in the rural, out of the way community, decided to start a homestead and in some cases even raise livestock. I mean, I'm one of the many people that are guilty of binge watching some of those individuals with their YouTube channel. And the more I watch those type of videos, and I'm not gonna lie, I still watch those type of videos. To this day, I still watch them. I just watch them with a different eye, and I just watch them with a different mindset than I did before. But before, when I was watching those kind of videos, I couldn't quit thinking, man, how would it be like if I lived out in the country? How would it be like if I left the city and lived out in the country? Now, granted, I never had a desire to have livestock. However, doing some type of gardening to where I grow my own fruits and vegetables was something that I've always wanted to do. I mean, not only for health reasons, but to also save money at the grocery store. And of course, you have a lot of your preppers that live out in the country, because living out in the country allows them to do certain things with their land that they wouldn't be able to do if they lived in a city. I get all that. And those are some of the reasons why I myself wanted to live out in the country initially. But here are some things that, oh, and one more thing. I mean, you know, as you guys know, I'm black. For those of you that have been watching my channel for any length of time, you guys know I'm black. I do show my face on this channel. Now, with that being said, there's been a growing number of black families and even black individuals that have decided to leave the city and purchase land and live out in the country. Now, some people will tell you that living out in the country, it's an easier, more relaxing life, less stress out in the country compared to living in town or in the city, less crime, quieter, and the benefits of living out in the country, according to many people, will go on and on and on and on. And initially, I felt the same way they felt because I never lived out in the country. So I was just going off what other people were saying, primarily. But I remember, you know, a little over a year ago, I came down here to Alabama. I purchased a home. It was a fixer-upper, and it was out in the country. It was about 15 minutes away from the closest small town. And that small town only had a population of, I want to say, 2,500 people, give or take. So this area we're out in the middle of nowhere. And the house I owned at that time, I mean, you know, since it was close enough to town to where I had city water. However, since I was out in the country, I had septic systems. I had 2 septic systems due to the square footage of the house. The house was 1,900 square feet, and it came with 2 baths. So I had 2 septic systems, one on each side of the house. And given the fact that I was out in the country, now I know, depending on what state you live in or what region of the state that you live in, this, you know, circumstances could differ a little bit. But, you know, in southern Alabama, if you live out in the country, your cell phone reception is going to be crappy. And as far as what type of internet packages are going to be available, are going to also be crappy. And in most cases, you're going to still have to pay around the same price for those crappy choices as somebody else would pay for much better options for those who lived in town. So, you know, so what happened was I bought this house, and, you know, I hired some people to help me fix the house up. So we've had the house fixed up, ready to go within a month and a half. The people who I've hired to help me were wonderful people. I didn't want to spend forever fixing this house up, so I hired some help to get it done quicker. and this house I had, this house I purchased was basically a mold fest. So I had to hire some professionals to go in to remove all the mold as well. So this house I've had, it was a huge expense. So anyhow, it took me over a month to fix everything up. So I got the house fixed up, moved everything in. Now I noticed when I was living out in the country, I mean, like I said a minute ago, my cell phone reception was garbage. I mean, I was unable to make a call from inside the house. I had to go outside of my car to make a phone call, and even then, I could barely call. Cause I might make the call, the person answers, and then the phone hangs up. Sometimes I might even have to drive into town, which was 15 minutes away, in order to have decent cell phone reception. Now, this was, of course, when I first moved into this house, and this was before I was able to get this was before I got internet. Now, once I got internet, as you all know, with internet, typically you get Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi was a lifesaver for me, because if it wasn't for me to have Wi-Fi, I would have no way of using my cell phone at my house at that time. Because the only way I could use my cell phone in my house was to have it connected to Wi-Fi. So that's what I ended up doing once I got internet. Now, my internet package was crappy. It was garbage. And the package I got was crappy because of where I was living. Now, so anyhow, with this internet package, it took me 7 hours. And I kid you not, it took me 7 to 8 hours to upload maybe 3 or 4 half-hour videos from my channel. Now, where I'm living now, I mean, I'm in town. I mean, I do live in a rural community, but it's in town. So since I live in town, my internet service is a lot better than what it was before. Like now, if I wanted to upload, let's say, 1 half-hour video, I can have it uploaded within, 15 minutes tops. As where before, if I wanted to upload 1 half-hour video, it could take me in upwards of 3 hours. So I say that because although country living is glorified, like I told you at the beginning of the video, I wanted to discuss some of the disadvantages of living out in the country, which I think people need to understand and realize before taking the plunge and buying a house and living out in the country, thinking everything gonna be good and easy and peachy and creamy and all that. So, one thing that you gotta bear in mind is, if you live out in the country, depending on what state that you reside in, if you reside in a state similar to Alabama, which is where I'm currently living, you gotta bear in mind that if you're out in the country, your internet packages are not gonna be as good as they are if you were to live in town or if you were to live back in the city. Your cell phone reception is also not gonna be as good. In some cases, you may not be able to make a phone call at all because you're not going to have no reception. The only way you'll have reception is if you have it connected to Wi-Fi. So if you're away from your house, if you're too far away from your house, your phone is not going to be connected to Wi-Fi, which means you're not going to be able to use your phone. And you're not going to be able to use your phone. Like if you need to go on your GPS and get directions to get somewhere, you won't be able to do any of that stuff. Now, if you work from home and your occupation requires you to do a substantial amount of uploading, or if you're like me, you're a YouTuber and you do quite a bit of uploading, another thing you gotta bear in mind when living out in the country is, like I told you, your internet service is not gonna be as good. Like if you're living in town or you're living back in the city, you might be able to get you a internet package to where you'll have the proper speeds or what have you, to where you can upload let's say a half-hour video in 10 to 15 minutes, or in some cases quicker than that. As where if you're out in the country, the best package you might be able to get is a package to where it takes you in upwards of 2 hours to upload 1 half-hour video. Another thing that you need to think about when living out in the country is you also need to think about your health. Now, if you're a relatively healthy individual and you're able-bodied, you don't have any major physical disabilities, then you might be okay. Now, if you or someone who you're going to be living with has significant health issues or disabilities, that's going to be another thing you're going to want to take into consideration before living out in the country. Like, because a lot of times when you live out in the middle of nowhere, out in the country like this, you're going to be a lot farther away from decent hospitals and doctor offices. You're going to be a lot farther away from even urgent care clinics. You're going to be a lot farther away from pharmaceutical places. And you're going to also be a lot further away from grocery stores. I mean, so that's another thing you're going to want to think about when living out in the country is your health. Like if you live with someone who's got a bad heart, and they're prone to have strokes and heart attacks or whatever health conditions that they might be prone to have, to where they might have to get emergency care. I mean, obviously, if you're living in town or you're living in the city, you can call 911 and they'll be at your doorstep within a couple of minutes. But if you're living like out here, out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere, if you can even call out 911, because, you know, like I said, if you live too far, you're not going to have good cell phone reception. So even if you got decent cell phone reception and you're able to get out, you're able to call out 911, it might take EMS, depending on how far in the sticks you live, it might take EMS 10-15 minutes to get to your door. And if the situation is urgent, you or your loved one might be dead by the time they arrive to do what they do. Now, I know it's a very negative thing for me to say. I'm not trying to scare anybody from moving to the country. I just want you guys to understand some of the realities of living out in the country. Another reality living out in the country is services. Like, do you drive newer vehicles, or are you like me and you drive older vehicles? Even if you drive newer vehicles, are you mechanically inclined? Can you fix your own stuff? Or do you rely on auto mechanic garages to fix your vehicles? That's another thing. Obviously, if you're on your way home, or you're on your way to doing whatever it is you do, you're on your way to work, whatever, and your vehicle breaks down in the middle of a road like this, obviously, yeah. You're gonna probably call whoever you know. You're gonna call someone to tow your vehicle to your house or whatever. That's what many of you will most likely think of doing. But what you need to think about is, if you live out in the country like this, Where are you going to take your vehicle? I mean, again, you're going to be a lot farther away from decent auto mechanics that A, know what they're doing, and B, they're not going to rip you off. And C, they're going to fix your vehicle in a timely manner. Because sometimes when you go to these small rural town mechanics, A, they're going to rip you off, and B, they're going to take forever to fix your vehicle. In some of these super small towns, there might not even be a mechanic available. The closest mechanic to you might be a half hour away. So if you get if your vehicle breaks down and you don't have any type of towing service membership, either through your insurance company or through an organization such as AAA, you're going to be paying out a couple $100 one way to tow your vehicle to whatever mechanic that you desire to go to. And then once your vehicle is at the mechanic, how do you get back to your home? Given that there's not going to be no kind of public transportation out in these small communities, especially here in Alabama. Now, and another thing, let's see, so you got to think about that. And another thing that some of you need to think about before moving out in the country is, and this is one of the issues I've had when I was living out in the country. Let's say you're like me. You're not from Alabama. You're not from the area in which you chose to reside. Maybe you're from a whole nother state, like me. I'm not from Alabama. Most everyone who I'm close to and know, they're all up in Indiana and Ohio. So if you choose to come out here in the country not knowing anyone, now if you come out here in the country as a couple or you got a family, that's gonna be a little more convenient than doing like what I did, which is to move out to an area like this by myself, knowing nobody. At least if you have a family, like if you need your son or your daughter to do something for you, they can do something for you. If you need your wife or your husband to come pick you up in the arranged tow truck or whatever they gotta do to get you home safely in the event that your vehicle breaks down, you got that. But if you're like me and you live out here in the country by yourself, you have nobody. So what do you do? Well, obviously, if you're gonna live out here in the country, you're gonna want to make sure that you have towing services available. Now, many insurance companies now will have towing service. A lot of times when you purchase an insurance policy, you'll have towing services available to you through the insurance company. However, many of your insurance companies, your towing service might only cover you for the first, let's say, 3 to 5 miles. But then after that 5th mile, you gotta pay X amount of money per mile. Now with me, since I do a lot of traveling, and I have the tendency to live in the middle of nowhere, I have AAA because I also drive older vehicles. And I got AAA Gold, which means if I break down, I get the first 100 miles free. And when you live out in the country like this, that free 100 miles of towing is going to be extremely convenient and beneficial and helpful. Because if you break down, you might be a half hour from your house, or Yeah, you might be a half hour from your house. Or if you want to take your vehicle directly to your mechanic, you might be over a half hour to your mechanic, wherever your mechanic might be located. So if you live out in the country, that's another thing you're going to want to take into consideration. You're going to want to make sure that you have adequate towing services available for when your vehicle breaks down. Now, speaking of vehicles, if you have the money, you're going to want to make sure that you have decent, reliable transportation. Like, yeah, you're going to want to make sure that whatever vehicles that you choose to purchase, new or used, you're going to want to make sure that those vehicles are decent, they're reliable, and they're not going to break down on you. And obviously, when it comes to grocery stores, if you live in the country, you're going to be further away from grocery stores. The closest grocery store, like in my case when I was living out in the country, the closest grocery store was 15 minutes away from my house. Yeah, I did not like that grocery store because it was a ripoff. Everything was super overpriced. I mean, now where I used to live, I mean, down the street a little bit, yes, there was a gas station and a Dollar General, but as far as an actual grocery store, that was 15 minutes away. Or I can drive 40 minutes away and I'll have access to a Walmart, which is what I did. I mean, each week I drove 40 minutes to a bigger community and I went to Walmart and bought my stuff. Because the grocery store that was closer to me, everything was overpriced. And not only that, but the quality of the food wasn't as good and the selections weren't as good. So I ended up dropping that 40 minutes to go to Walmart. And where I lived, back when I was living out in the country, my auto mechanic was a good 20 minutes away from my house. That was the closest mechanic. He was 20 minutes away. The closest gas station was about 10 minutes away. Because I was out in the middle of freaking nowhere at this particular time. And if you go back and you watch, I mean, I don't want to repeat all this again, but when I was living out in the country, I had an issue with one of my neighbors. I mean, you know, they were being disrespectful. So, yeah, during the time I was out there, I had an issue with my neighbors due to their disrespect for my property. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on that. I've already talked about that on one of my Alabama. Like, I made 3 videos recently. Should you move to Alabama? Now, I can't remember which video it was that I discussed my neighbors. I want to say it was my second video of the Should You Move to Alabama series. So if you care to hear more about that story, check out one of those videos. And anyhow, another thing that I believe is important for people to know before moving out in the country is home repairs. Again, are you able to fix your own house? Like, are you good with the tools? Are you willing or able to climb on top of your roof and do roofing work if necessary? Are you able or willing to go into your crawl space and do your own plumbing if necessary? Do you know anything about the electrical components of your house? Now I'm gonna be truthful. When it came to the plumbing, I was able to, when it came to the plumbing, I was able to do some of it. Now, me being a bigger person, I did not go into my crawl space because crawl spaces make me claustrophobic. Now, when it came to the electrical components, I didn't do anything there either because I don't know anything about electric and I'm not trying to hurt myself or the house. So I hired professionals to do stuff like that. Which, by the way, it took me forever to find people that would A, come out to my house at that time and do the work, and B, not give me a rip-off price, and C, do the work correctly the first time. Because sometimes when you live in these small rural, in the middle of nowhere communities, it might take you a little longer to find a contractor to do work for your house, whatever work your house might need. It might take you a little longer to find you a decent person to come and do the work that you need done. Like if you live in the city or you live in town, you might be able to get someone the next day to come to your house. But if you live out in the country, in the middle of nowhere like this, like I used to, it could take upwards of 2 weeks to get someone to come to your house. Because a lot of people are not going to want to drive that far to do work for you. Now, I will say, when I was living out in the country up in Indiana, I've had a little better luck with contractors than I've had, here in Alabama in some cases. But in many cases, if you live real far out in the country like this, you're gonna have a harder time finding decent contractors to come out in a timely manner and do work for you. Alright, people, I'm sorry for the interruption. I was running out of video to continue to have my discussion of the realities of living out in the country / rural community and my experiences of living in these kind of communities. Now, the videos that you're going to see from here on out are basically going to be the same video. Basically, this is going to be the same video that you just saw. It's going to be the exact same places. I'm just simply playing this video again because I want to continue my conversation with you guys about the realities of living in small rural communities / living out in the country. So if seeing the same thing twice bores you, my apologies. But this is what I'm going to have to do in order to continue my discussion, because I didn't record any more than 37 minutes worth of video for this particular topic, because I did not think it would take me that long to discuss what I'm discussing. But every time I get into these type of conversations, it almost always takes me longer than I anticipate. So let's continue. Now, I left off at another disadvantage of living out in the country. I think before I was talking about, I can't remember what I was talking about. I think I was talking about auto mechanics. No, I was talking about contractors for home repairs. That's what I was discussing. So yeah, so depending on what might be wrong with your house, if it's something that's super urgent and you're living out in the middle of nowhere, you're living a half hour or farther from a larger city, or from even a smaller city with at least a 10,000 people population, if you were to call a contractor to come and do any kind of work to your home, I mean, it could take an upwards of 2 weeks before they come to your house. Now, I've had situations where I call a contractor to come to my house at the time and do stuff, and they tell me, okay, they'll be out at my house on Thursday. Thursday comes and goes, and no show. I call them to see what's going on, and either A, they tell me, oh, they couldn't get out, they'll get out on Tuesday. I'm using this as an example. Tuesday comes and goes, still no show. Call them again, and they'll have another excuse. So sometimes they'll just not answer the call any longer, and then I would have to go find somebody else. Or if you do get someone that's going to come to your home in a timely manner, they're going to charge you a premium price for their service due to the fact that you live further out. So that's another thing that you're going to want to bear in mind if you're going to be living out in the country. Are you able to fix your own stuff? Are you willing to fix your own stuff? If not, are you willing to wait longer to have things repaired? Are you willing to pay that premium price to have it done in a timely manner by a professional? Those are some more questions that you got to ask yourself before moving out in the country or in some rural, in the middle of nowhere community. Now next, let's talk about safety, the big elephant in the room. Now, a lot of you assume that because you're in some small rural town or you're out in the country, you ain't gotta worry about safety. Everything's gonna be good. No one's gonna mess with your stuff. You ain't gotta worry about Pookie and Ray Ray. Everything's gonna be good. Well, yes and no. When you live out in the country like this, depending on what part of the country that you live in, whether you're living up north or down south or out west or over east, I mean, like if you're living somewhere in the mountains out west, out west, you might have to worry about mountain lions. You'll have mountain lions, you'll have wolves, you'll have coyotes. And there's other places, like down here in the south, even in the deep south. Yes, we do have brown bears, and brown bears can be quite dangerous. Now, for the most part, they don't mess with people, but if they get desperate enough, if they get hungry enough, they can be quite dangerous. And we do have coyotes, we do got wolves. And living down here in the deep south, we got a whole bunch of poisonous insects. We have a whole bunch of venomous snakes. I mean, and even if you live in cooler climates such as the Midwest. Now, granted, the Midwest is not going to have as many poisonous bugs or snakes as we have down here in the South. But even up in the Midwest, you know, the Midwest still has snakes. They still got poisonous bugs, just not near as many as down here. And of course, in most other parts of the country, you're going to have brown bears, you're going to have coyotes, you're going to probably have wolves, and in certain parts of the country, you're going to have cougars. And if you live way up north, like in Alaska, you're going to have grizzly bears, and you might even have polar bears. So I would say if you want to live out in the country, now this is something that most people who want to live out in the country already know, but if you want to live out in the country, I would highly advise you to have some type of weapon to where if you have to, you can defend yourself from animals that might attack you, and some of which might have the potential of taking your life, of you or any of your loved ones or your pets or your children. So, even though out here the population of people is going to be much more sparse compared to the city, out here you're going to still want to have some type of a weapon so you can take care of business if necessary. I mean, like, if a wolf or a coyote comes at you, or in some cases a bear tries to come at you, you can take care of business. And another thing about safety is, if you're going to live out in the country or you're going to live in some small rural community, and again, this depends on where you live. Now, as I've told you before, down here in Alabama, in fact, down here in many parts of the Deep South, if you're going to live in a rural community or out on the countryside, don't make the mistake of assuming that you're going to be safe and you're not going to have to worry about people messing with you or messing with your possessions because you're living out in the country. Like, if you go on Zillow or Realtor.com or Craigslist and you look at a piece of land that you might be interested in purchasing, and everything looks good. It's got all the utilities that you want. It's got running water. It's got water. It's got septic. It's not too far from certain amenities. Or you're looking at a house or a piece of real estate that you want to purchase that might sit on several acres of land. And you're thinking, man, this is a good price. This is a good deal. You call a realtor up, and your realtor confirms, yeah, that's a good deal. You know what? Hop in your vehicle, drive out to that location, and look at that property in person. Because, as I've told you before, many of these realtors are masters at taking the best picks of a particular piece of real estate or a particular piece of land to where it's going to look like you're somewhere in paradise when really that property is located in the ghetto. So I can't emphasize enough, whatever piece of property that you're interested in buying, go and look at it in person, drive around the area, ask all the appropriate questions, do your due diligence. Don't just buy property sight unseen. There's a lot of people in this current housing market that have done that. And like during the summer, when the housing market was off the chain, a lot of people have done that. They bought houses sight unseen, and now they're having regrets. Either A, the house needed more work than what they've anticipated because they chose to skip home inspections. B, they don't like the neighborhood. Online, on pics, in the pics, the house looked good, neighborhood looked good, and then when they got to the area in person, it's like, oh shit, now they're in the ghetto. And now they want to sell the house and move on with their life. So now they got regrets of buying the house or the property due to that. Because even out here in the country, especially in many parts of the Deep South, there are plenty of poor, heavily impoverished rural communities. And there's plenty of rural communities that have crime numbers that are every bit as high as the crime numbers of crime numbers that you would expect to see in major cities. I mean, there's properties out here in the middle of nowhere that you will see, and that house will have bars on the window. You will go down the street, and all your little stores and gas stations and convenience stores also have bars on the window. So here, if you're gonna move anywhere in the Deep South especially, don't assume because a property is located out in the country that it's gonna be safe. Because down here in the Deep South, that's not gonna always be the case. Let's see what else. Oh, and another thing is, a lot of you who want to move out in the country, you never lived out in the country before, you've always been a city slicker, as some of them will call you. Another thing you gotta understand living out in the country is, many people who live out in the country or they live out in these small rural communities understand something. I mean, one thing you're gonna want to understand is, a lot of people who live in these kind of communities value their privacy. They put very high value on their privacy. So please, triple please, for the sake of, I mean, I would say in some cases for the sake of your life, and I literally mean what I say, for the sake of your life. If you move to any of these small rural communities, or you move to the countryside to where you got neighbors relatively close by, don't just pop up on their doorstep and ask them, hey man, what's your name? I'm so and so, and try to holler at them. Don't do that. The best thing that you can do for your own safety is to allow your neighbors to come to you. If they don't come to you, you don't go to them. Because with you being new to the area and not knowing anyone, and no one knows who the hell you are, I mean, this is, I'm getting ready to say might sound a little severe. And again, I'm not trying to scare you from living out in the country or living in some rural community. I'm just being realistic. But if you're not from the area, and you come pop up on someone's doorstep, or you come walking through someone's yard, I mean, number one, a lot of these people got watchdogs. So either A, you'll get attacked by their dog. B, you come across someone's yard who ain't wrapped too tight, they might pull out that rifle and do what it do to you. You know what I'm saying? They might pull out that piece and do what it do. So my advice is, if you're going to live out in the country or in some small rural community, don't go to none of your neighbors. Let your neighbors come to you. Some of them might come to you right away. Some of them will never come to you. And there's some that might come to you after about 5 or 6 months. But whatever you do, let them come to you. You don't go to them. Because a lot of people out in these rural communities are going to they value their privacy. You got to think, a lot of people moved out to communities like this because they do not want to be bothered by a bunch of people. They prefer to be left alone. And another thing that you got to take into consideration when living out in the country is, you're going to deal with some people that are relatively small-minded. You're going to deal with some people that are closed-minded. What I mean by that is, again, you're going to deal with people that are going to feel some type of way about people who are not of their ethnicity. Now, so, and I say this because there's been a growing number of people who look like me that have been checking into this country living, this world town living, trying to get out the city type movements that's been going on and circulating social media more and more. So if you look like me or you're of a darker complexion, understand some of these country towns and small world communities are not going to be, they're not going to necessarily welcome people who might be a little darker than themselves, who might be of a different ethnicity than themselves. And again, I'm not saying all country areas are like that, because they're not. I'm not saying that all world communities are like that, because they're not. And like I told you at the beginning of the video, I myself live in a world community right now as I speak. So not all world communities are like that. But there's enough of them out here that are like that. And I'm not just talking in the South, I'm talking all over the country. East Coast, West Coast, up north. I'm talking all over the country. There's a significant amount of world communities like this that are full of people who are full of hate. They're full of ignorance. They're real small-minded. So that's going to be another thing that you're going to want to take into consideration before moving to any of these communities. And again, how can you detect who you're going to be living among? Again, do your due diligence. Drive around the area. Ask a few questions. One thing I've learned is there's people out in these small world communities and these countryside communities that they have, their level of intellect is of a second grader. They're like, some of these people, their level of intellect is so low it's scary. And then to think that a lot of these people own shotguns and rifles and handguns is, to me that's a scary concept. So yeah, you're gonna definitely, like I said, if you're of a darker complexion or if you're a minority, you're gonna definitely wanna check into the ethnic makeup of that particular area before you go on ahead and you purchase that piece of land or you purchase that piece of real estate. You're gonna want to check into all that type of stuff, because not checking into that stuff, I don't know how to say it nicely. Just check into it for your, just for your own sake and for your family's sake. If you have a family, check into that type of stuff. Oh, and another thing that you're going to want to bear in mind before moving out in the country or a rural community is employment. What kind of work do you do? What kind of skills do you got? Now many people that are moving out to these kind of communities work, they work online. They work from home. So another question you gotta ask yourself is your job gonna be stable? Are you gonna permanently be working from home? Or are you gonna eventually have to return back to an office? And if you work from home, how frequently are you gonna have to go to town to go to a meetup of some sort? And and on top of that, and for those of you that don't work from home, you work a regular 9 to 5, or maybe you run a business. What kind of business do you run? What type of a job do you work? Like in some of these small country towns, if you work if you do white collar work, you're gonna most likely have to drive substantially farther to get to your job every day. If you do blue collar work, in many of these small country rural communities, I mean, some of them, they will have a few opportunities available, and those opportunities are going to typically pay substantially less compared to what you'll make if you were living in the city. So if you work blue collar work, or you work jobs that are entry level, or you're going to be willing to drive further to get to work every day? Are you going to be, if you don't want to drive further to get to work, are you going to be willing to take a pay cut? Are you going to be able to afford to take a pay cut? Are you going to be able to afford to drive the extra distance to your job every day? Do you have vehicles that are going to be reliable enough? And you also, and if you do drive extra to go to work every day, if you're willing to drive further and longer, you're gonna also have to budget for a new vehicle. You're gonna have to budget more for another vehicle. You're gonna have to budget more for wear and tear on your vehicle. Obviously, you're gonna have to budget more for fuel. And I'm going to touch real quick once again on health. Are you going to have the stamina to get up an extra hour earlier in the morning so you can drive that extra distance to work? Are you going to be, and then when you get home from work, you might have to drive an extra hour home. So you might have an additional 2-hour round trip to and from work every day, just driving. So are you going to have the stamina to be able to accommodate that type of a schedule? And for those of you that are moving out in the country, and you're moving to an area where you don't know anybody. And again, this ain't just for the South. This is for anywhere in the country that you move to. If you're moving to the countryside, or you're moving to a small rural community to where you don't know anybody close by, you don't know anybody in the immediate community, are you going to be good with being by yourself for a while at least? Or if you're moving into an area as a family or as a couple, are you going to be good with moving there and not knowing nobody? Are you going to be good with feeling like an outsider, at least for a while? If you are, then cool. If not, then you might want to reconsider moving out in the country. You'll probably be better off living somewhere in town. And of course, when you're living out in the countryside at nighttime, you're not going to have the lighting of the streets like you do when you live in town. Like where I used to live, there was no street lights on the road, none. Like for those that needed extra lighting that night, we paid an additional, I want to say, $7 for the light company, for the electric company to put light to our lamp. Like at my house, I had a lamp. Most houses where I used to live out in the country had lamps. And if you needed additional light beyond the lights that were on your house, then there is like a huge lamp in front of your yard, or it might be in front of your house, or it might be by your house. And if you pay the extra $7 a month on your electric bill, then at nighttime that lamp comes on, and it will provide you extra light for your yard. Let's see what else. And I've already talked about this, but obviously if you live out in the country, you're gonna have to be good with wildlife. Like, you might wake up and when you walk outside, there might be a deer that's sitting in your front yard. Are you good with that type of stuff? And I mean, I'm pretty sure if I think hard enough, I can think of more stuff for people to consider before moving out in the country. But this video is super long as it is right now, and I don't want to keep on mumbling just to mumble. So I think I've covered at least most of all the major things that I feel people need to consider before moving out in the country. Because oftentimes on social media, living out in the country, living out in the rural community, blah, blah, blah. I mean, oftentimes living like this is overrated. It's glorified way too much, and in some cases it's overrated. Now, a lot of people move out to these areas not knowing what they're getting into, and then once they move out here, all of a sudden they're depressed, they got buyer's remorse, and now they want to start over and go back to the city life. So for those of you that still desire to live out in the country or out in some rural community, I mean, I wish every last one of you the best of luck. Like I told you guys already, I live here in a rural part of, I live here in a small rural community here in Alabama. And, some days, I'm not going to lie to you people, some days I wake up and I ask myself, hey, what the hell did I do here? Because even though I haven't lived in the city in over a year, I mean, sometimes I miss the city. There's things about the city that I miss sometimes. I mean, sometimes I find myself missing being closer to more and better amenities compared to the amenities you typically will have access to when you're living in rural communities. So that's another thing. If you want to live out in the country, some of you are going to come out in the country, and yes, you will miss the city. You will miss being closer to certain amenities. Some of you might miss being closer to people. So, alright folks, I'm going to end this video. I'm getting a little tired here. So, like always, thanks for tuning in and watching another episode of Andrew's Life. If you like what you heard, give me a thumbs up. Help the YouTube algorithm on this video and on my channel. If you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. And until next time, everyone have a blessed one, and I will see you on the next one.